मनसूबाबंदी को, नफरत को, शिकस्त को।
In Pakistan's 2024 general elections, MQM-P won the majority of National Assembly seats in Karachi. According to the Election Commission, the party secured over a dozen constituencies across the city. But did the returned candidates really win those seats? Or were the results altered after polls closed? Soch explains how the 2024 elections were rigged in Karachi. We investigated prominent Karachi constituencies using the same methodology we applied to Lahore in our previous analysis. NA 242, where MQM-P's Mustafa Kamal, now Federal Health Minister, claimed victory against PTI's Dawa Sabir. NA 238, where MQM-P's Sadiq Iftikhar defeated PTI's Haleem Sheikh. And NA 236, where MQM-P's Hassaan Sabir recorded a 27-1 margin over his opponent Alamgir Khan. Across these constituencies, we examined over 1,000 polling stations. We compared National Assembly and Provincial Assembly results, analyzed turnout patterns, and identified mathematical fingerprints that distinguish authentic election data from fabricated results. For viewers unfamiliar with Form 45 documentation and how vote counting works in Pakistan, we recommend watching our Lahore investigation first or consulting the links in the description. The figures we cite in the first half of this analysis come entirely from the Election Commission of Pakistan's official records. We do this deliberately. The government cannot dismiss the analysis as partisan when we use their own numbers to expose the problems with their results. But something very important to note before we begin is that on 3rd February 2026, just days before the second anniversary of the Election Commission quietly removed all Sindh Form 45s from their website. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly why the government does not want anyone examining these forms. Let's begin. NA 242 covers the Kimari area of Karachi. It has 286 polling stations with over 400,000 registered voters. The main contest was between MQM-P's Mustafa Kamal and PTI-backed Dawa Sabir. Mustafa Kamal allegedly won with 71,597 votes compared to Dawa Khan's 53,789, a margin of nearly 18,000 votes. According to the ECP-issued results, Dawa Khan won 185 polling stations while Mustafa Kamal won only 101. So according to the ECP's figures, Dawa Khan won nearly two-thirds of all polling stations in the constituency, yet Kamal won the overall election. The only way this is mathematically possible is if Kamal won his minority of stations by extraordinarily large margins. This brings us to the first piece of evidence. Pakistan's national average turnout in 2024 was 47.8%. In the 2020 United States presidential election, which saw unusually high engagement, turnout reached 64%. Indian elections typically see 50 to 60%. Even in highly contested elections in engaged democracies, turnout rarely exceeds 70%. But according to the ECP-issued results, 37 polling stations in NA 242 recorded voter turnout exceeding 90%. Polling station 18 recorded exactly 100% turnout, 739 votes from 739 registered voters. Every single registered voter supposedly showed up and cast a ballot. Polling station 261 recorded 99.6% turnout, 1,996 votes from 2,005 registered voters. Polling station 5 recorded 98.9%. Polling station 24 recorded 98.4%. Polling station 19 recorded 98.2%. A 98% turnout would be remarkable even in countries with compulsory voting. Australia, which does have compulsory voting, recorded its highest turnout in the past decade at just 92.41%. Pakistan does not have compulsory voting. Now consider this. All 37 of those high turnout stations were won by Mustafa Kamal. Dawa Khan won none of them. Given that Kamal won only 35% of polling stations overall, the probability of him winning all 37 high turnout stations by chance is less than 1 in 50 quadrillion. This mathematically proves that the votes were deliberately changed. When we plot all 286 polling stations by turnout, a striking pattern emerges. Most stations cluster in the normal range between 10 and 60%. Then there's a gap. Very few stations appear between 60 and 80%. Then another cluster appears starting around 80%, exceeding to 100%. This bimodal distribution indicates two different sources of data: real results in one cluster, fabricated results in another. In authentic elections, turnout varies smoothly across stations. The gap exists because adding fake votes pushed certain stations into implausibly high ranges, while leaving others untouched. This brings us to the second main piece of evidence. On election day, voters cast two ballots at the same polling station, one for the National Assembly and one for the Provincial Assembly. Both are received, marked, and deposited within seconds of each other. Therefore, NA and PS turnouts at any station should be essentially identical. Small differences of a few hundred votes are normal. Someone might spoil one ballot but not the other. Differences of hundreds or thousands should not occur. This is exactly what the ECP issued results show. Polling station 261 recorded 1,996 National Assembly votes but only 527 Provincial Assembly votes. NA turnout was 99.6%, PS turnout was 26.3%, a gap of 73 percentage points. At polling station 92, NA turnout was 96.3%, while PS turnout was 19.2%. This is the case in 59 polling stations we analyzed. The ECP is claiming that in these polling stations, nearly everyone voted for the National Assembly, but only half or a quarter of those people bothered to vote for the Provincial Assembly, which is highly suspicious. This violent chart shows turnout distribution at stations won by each candidate. For Dawa Khan stations, National Assembly and Provincial Assembly distributions overlap. Both cluster around 20 to 40%. For Kamal stations, PS turnout remains normal, but NA turnout shows a concentration at 80 to 100% as well. If there was anything normal or natural about this discrepancy, it would appear in polling stations won by both candidates. Yet turnout diverges dramatically at only Kamal's polling stations. Dawa Khans do not show national and provincial turnout differences, just like they didn't show artificially high turnouts, suggesting they are untampered with. So let's examine the 37 polling stations showing turnout exceeding 90%. According to ECP data, Mustafa Kamal won every single one, and Dawa Khan won none, as we've already mentioned. We found 59 polling stations where NA turnout exceeded PS turnout by more than 100 votes, and Kamal won 53 out of 59 of them. Unsurprisingly, the polling stations with impossible turnout and the polling stations with massive National Assembly and Provincial Assembly discrepancies are largely the same polling stations, and nearly all were won by Mustafa Kamal. For example, polling station 24 appears on all three lists, 98.4% turnout, large NAPS discrepancy, and won by Kamal. Polling station 19, 98.2% turnout, large NAPS discrepancy, won by Kamal. Polling station 6, 96.7% turnout, large NAPS discrepancy, won by Kamal. The pattern repeats across dozens of stations. Consider what the ECP data is asking us to believe. At these specific polling stations, turnout surged to levels never seen in Pakistani elections. At the same stations, voters cast National Assembly ballots but supposedly declined to cast Provincial Assembly ballots by the hundreds. And at these same stations, Kamal won by large margins, far larger than anywhere else in the constituency. So how likely was this happening by chance? Kamal won 35% of polling stations overall. If high turnout stations were distributed randomly between the two candidates, he would have won about 13 of the 37. He won all 37. If NAPS discrepancy stations were distributed randomly, he would have won about 20 of the 59. He won 53. Again, if this wasn't caused by post-poll rigging, both candidates would benefit from the supposed increased participation. Instead, at high turnout stations, Kamal's totals ballooned while Dawa Khan's remained normal. The extra votes went entirely to one candidate. Now, a very interesting pattern emerges when you look more closely at the difference in votes, not percentages, between national and provincial turnouts recorded at the same polling stations. At polling station 24, exactly 1,000 votes. At polling station 19, exactly 900 votes. At polling station 59, exactly 900 votes again. At polling station 6, 15, 139, 206, exactly 800 votes each. At 14 of these 59 polling stations with large NAPS discrepancies, the differences are round numbers. So even though the ECP or the winners might say the differences are coincidence would produce random differences from polling station to polling station. Round numbers ending in double zeros suggest deliberate addition, or in plain language, someone writing digits to the left of existing figures. Consider how this works. If the real count of people voting for MQM Pakistan at a polling station was 337 and someone scribbled a 1 to the left of only the National Assembly result, it would become 1337. But the MQM Pakistan candidate's result in the provincial race would still be 337 votes. The difference between NA and PS turnout would then be exactly 1,000 votes. If the differences were random, approximately 1% would end in 00 by chance, given that there are 100 possible two-digit endings and 00 is just one of them. Among the 59 polling stations with NAPS discrepancies greater than 100 votes, we found 14 had differences ending in 00. That means a result expected 1% of the time was recorded 14% of the time. The odds of this happening by chance can be calculated with a simple mathematical formula and come out to around 1 in 20 trillion, meaning these differences could not be a result of chance. They were created deliberately. At this point, you might be wondering, if the rigging is this blatant, why haven't the courts thrown these supposed winners out? Well, the candidates who lost these seats did not accept the ECP-issued results quietly. All the candidates mentioned in this video maintained they had won based on the Form 45s their polling agents collected on election night, and dozens of candidates from PTI and other opposition parties like Jamaat-e-Islami filed petitions at the Sindh High Court to that effect. Within days of the election, the High Court referred their cases to the Election Commission of Pakistan with directions to hear the petitions and pass speaking orders. The ECP dismissed them through brief orders citing jurisdiction issues without examining any evidence. The candidates then approached election tribunals. As of August 2025, 18 months after the election, Sindh's tribunals had only reviewed 25% of petitions filed before them, the lowest clearance rate in the country. Nationally, of the 171 petitions decided so far, 168 were dismissed, most on procedural grounds such as non-maintainability, rather than any scrutiny of the underlying claims. Unfortunately, the data we present in this video has never been examined by any court. NA 236, Hassaan Sabir versus Alamgir Khan. NA 236 in Karachi East presents a completely different anomaly from the other constituency. Here, the results appear to have been fabricated wholesale rather than adjusted after genuine counting. But first, let's quickly go over the results. This constituency saw a contest between MQM-P's Hassaan Sabir and PTI-backed Alamgir Khan. According to the ECP, Hassaan Sabir won with 38,596 votes, while Alamgir Khan received just 1,425, an already unlikely 27-to-1 ratio. Such a large margin is unusual in any contested election, particularly against a candidate from a party that was winning constituencies across the country. But when we examined the ECP-issued results for this seat, we found something very suspicious. Out of the 294 polling stations, 262 recorded 0 votes for the PTI candidate. Not low votes, 0 votes. In 89% of the constituency, the opposition candidate supposedly received not a single vote. To understand how implausible this is, consider MQM's recent electoral history in Karachi. 2018's general election was a dramatic collapse for the party. Its main offshoot, MQM Pakistan or MQM-P, won just 4 out of 21 Karachi seats. PTI swept the city with 14. MQM-P and Mustafa Kamal's Pak Sarzameen party combined received roughly 27% of Karachi's votes in 2018, while PTI received 36%, meaning PTI had around 300,000 more voters across the city. NA 236 specifically illustrates this decline. In 2018, PTI won it with 91,373 votes. The MQM candidate received just 24,082 votes, a 67,000 vote margin. When a by-election was held in October 2018, PTI's Alamgir Khan retained it comfortably, defeating MQM-P's candidate by a 15,000 vote margin. So how is the ECP expecting us to believe that PTI wasn't even able to muster 2,000 votes in a seat it won with 91,000 votes just 4 years ago? Now we come back to clear evidence of wholesale fabrication. Listen to this. Out of 294 polling stations, 277 recorded NA turnout between 24.9 and 25.1%. 49 stations recorded turnout of exactly 25%. In real elections, turnout varies naturally from station to station. Some neighborhoods are politically more engaged, some polling stations are more accessible. Weather affects some areas differently. These factors produce a distribution, with some stations showing higher turnout and others lower, typically spread across a range of 15 to 20 percentage points. To illustrate, in NA 242, even with the manipulated high turnout stations included, the standard deviation in turnout is 24.7 percentage points. That reflects real variation in human voting behavior combined with the artificial spikes at manipulated stations. In NA 236, the standard deviation is 1.34 percentage points. Across 294 polling stations, turnout varies by barely more than 1%. This uniformity is statistically impossible in a real election. It does not happen when humans vote. It happens when someone enters a formula into a spreadsheet. Registered voters multiplied by 0.25 to generate a turnout figure. Alarmingly, this impossible uniformity extends to MQM-P's votes as well. In 267 of the 294 polling stations, MQM-P's vote totals fall between 29 and 31% of turnout. Consider what this means. At polling station after polling station, Hassaan Sabir received votes from 30% of the voters at that particular polling station, not 25% at some, and not 40% at others, as you would expect from genuine variation in voter preferences across neighborhoods. Almost exactly 30%, hundreds of times in a row. So the complete formula appears to be turnout equals 25% of registered voters, MQM-P votes equal 30% of turnout, and PTI votes equal 0. This means NA 236 represents the most brazen form of fabrication that we've encountered so far. In other constituencies, someone took real results and altered them, adding digits, swapping votes. The underlying data still contain traces of genuine voting patterns mixed with manipulation. In NA 236, the data contains no such traces. It has no connection to reality at all. So far, we've only used Election Commission copies for the Form 45 results. So none of these findings rely on opposition claims. They come entirely from the Election Commission's own published figures. But there is a second dataset that allows us to see exactly how the manipulation was accomplished. When voting concludes, officials count ballots in the presence of party representatives and record results on Form 45. The presiding officer and party agents sign the form, and carbon copies are distributed to each party. This system exists so that if there's any dispute about the outcome, parties can compare their copies. For the 2024 elections, PTI collected these carbon copies and uploaded them to a public GitHub repository. The government has dismissed them as fabricated, but PTI began uploading forms within days of the election, long before the ECP did. PTI copies also bear presiding officer's signatures, but most importantly, the PTI copies are internally consistent. Vote totals add up correctly, and turnout figures are plausible. The mathematical impossibilities in ECP data, turnouts touching 100%, totals that don't match, massive unexplained discrepancies, are absent from the PTI dataset.
And it's not just us who reach these conclusions.
In October 2024, the Commonwealth Observer Group noted that Form 45 copies held by party agents differed from those on the ECP website. with unfeasibly high voter turnout figures or very high differentials between turnout for National Assembly and Provincial Assembly elections. They concluded that this could have resulted in a number of candidates being inappropriately returned as elected. The Commonwealth report also noted that the shutdown of mobile phone services on election day reduced the transparency of the process, and that the lack of digitally transmitted results forms expanded opportunities for the manipulations of Forms 45, 46, and 47. Separately, the civil society organization Patan examined NA 242 and found that at 36 polling stations with turnout exceeding 90%, the winner in nearly all was incidentally Mustafa Kamal. They concluded that runner-up losing candidates were declared winners through doctoring Form 47. We can't definitively prove every PTI Form 45 is authentic, but we can observe that they are free from the anomalies in the ECP results, and independent observers documented the same discrepancies that we found. According to the ECP-issued results, Mustafa Kamal received 71,597 votes in NA 242, but according to the PTI Form 45s, he received just 22,740 votes, a difference of nearly 49,000 votes. Meanwhile, ECP says Dawa Khan received 53,789 votes, while PTI says 53,857, a difference of only 68 votes. This shows the manipulation targeted only one candidate's totals. The PTI copies show Dawa Khan winning NA 242 by over 31,000 votes, but more importantly, they reveal the method of the rigging. By comparing the vote totals for each candidate in the ECP-issued and PTI Form 45 copies, we found 39 polling stations where ECP-PTI differences for Kamal's votes end in double zeros, differences of 500, 600, 700, 800, or 1,000. Again, this represents someone adding digits to the front of existing numbers. If Kamal originally received 6 votes, someone added 12 to make it 1,206 votes. If he received 12 votes, someone added 10 to make it 1,012 votes. The technique is fast. You can alter dozens of forms by scribbling a digit before each number. But it's actually the PTI Form 45s that line up perfectly with the ECP-issued Form 45s for provincial races, better than the ECP's own copies of National Assembly results. What's important to realize here is that the round number differences in ECP-PTI comparisons and the round number NA-PS discrepancies within ECP data itself we discussed earlier are not two separate patterns. They measure the same manipulation from two different angles. For example, when someone adds a 10 to Kamal's vote count to turn 42 into 1,042, that creates 1,000 extra votes for Kamal. These 1,000 extra votes also increase NA turnout by 1,000. If PS turnout was not similarly altered, the NA-PS discrepancy will also be 1,000. This is exactly what we see. At polling station 24, the ECP-PTI difference in Kamal's votes is exactly 1,000. The NA-PS turnout difference is also exactly 1,000. At polling station 19, both differences are exactly 900. At polling station 59, both differences are exactly 900 again. And at polling station 6, both are exactly 800. Two independent calculations using different data arrive at identical stations. The NAPS comparison tells us how many votes were added, and the ECP-PTI comparison tells us who received them.
NA 238 is the third constituency we analyzed.
And you'll soon realize why we kept the whole discussion for the section including PTI forms. This seat saw a contest between MQM-P's Sadiq Iftikhar and PTI-backed Haleem Adil Sheikh. According to the ECP, Sadiq won with 55,680 votes to Haleem's 37,272 votes, a margin of about 18,000 votes. Sadiq won 191 polling stations to Haleem's 100.
We examined the ECP Form 45 documents for NA 238 to check for visible signs of alteration. Form 45 records each candidate's votes in two separate columns as a safeguard against tampering. But we found overwritten or corrected entries on Sadiq Iftikhar's vote columns at polling stations 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and many more. Basically, dozens and dozens of polling stations across the seat.
Every entry for the PTI candidate across all polling stations is recorded normally, with no visible alterations. The same pattern was also present in other constituencies we analyzed. And now here's the most important point. If recording errors occurred randomly, we would again expect that the corrections appear on both candidates' columns at roughly equal rates. Instead, the corrections cluster entirely on MQM-P candidates' columns. In this seat, comparing ECP to PTI data reveals an additional manipulation method: wholesale vote swapping. At polling station 137, ECP shows Sadiq with 557 votes and Haleem with 4. PTI data shows Sadiq with 4 votes and Haleem with 557. The numbers are mirror images. The candidates' totals were simply exchanged. This happens numerous times. At polling station 87, ECP shows Sadiq with 474 and Haleem with 2. PTI shows Sadiq with 2 and Haleem with 474. Altogether, we found 30 polling stations where the candidates' vote totals appear to have been exchanged wholesale. In addition, we found 62 polling stations where votes were transferred between candidates taken from Haleem's column and added to Sadiq's. we found exact round number transfers where the amount Sadiq gained equaled the amount Haleem lost. For example, at polling station 2, PTI copies record Sadiq with 19 votes and Haleem with 263. ECP copies show Sadiq with 219 and Haleem with 63. Exactly 200 votes moved from one column to another by shifting one digit. At polling station 7, PTI copies recorded Sadiq with 15 votes and Haleem with 313. ECP copies show Sadiq with 315 votes and Haleem with 13. Exactly 300 votes transferred. Again, 29 stations show transfers of exactly 100 votes, 43 stations show transfers of exactly 200 votes, 15 stations show transfers of exactly 300 votes, 4 stations show transfers of exactly 400 votes, and 1 station shows a transfer of exactly 500 votes. The mechanism is fairly straightforward. If PTI's forms show Haleem with 322 votes and Sadiq with 11, someone changes Haleem's count to 22 votes and Sadiq's count to 311. The 3 in the hundreds place moves from one candidate to the other. The total turnout stays roughly the same, which is why NA232 lacks the impossible high turnout stations we found in NA242. So to summarize, on election night, February 8, 2024, voting concluded across Karachi. Presiding officers at each polling station counted ballots in the presence of party representatives. They recorded results on Form 45s, signed the forms, and distributed carbon copies to each party's agents. These copies reflected the actual count. Based on these authentic counts, PTI candidates won NA242, NA236, NA238 at some point after the polls closed, but before the results were announced, intervention occurred. Mobile phone networks had been shut down across Pakistan on election day. As the Commonwealth observers noted, this reduced transparency of the process and meant results could not be digitally transmitted as required by law. The lack of digital transmission expanded opportunities for the manipulation of Forms 45, 46, and 47, as we already noted. Ultimately, MQM-P candidates were declared winners in constituencies they had lost. Over the following months, the ECP uploaded Form 45s to their website. These were not the originals signed on election night though. They were new versions reverse engineered to justify the false Form 47 results that had already been announced. The original Form 45s, preserved in PTI's carbon copies, tell a different story. The manipulation was fast but careless. But the PTI carbon copies of the Form 45s created on the night of the election preserved the original results. Comparing these to ECP-issued Form 45s published weeks or even months later reveals exactly what was changed, by how much, and through what methods. All data used in this analysis is publicly available. ECP Form 45s are on the Election Commission's official website, or at least they're supposed to be. PTI Form 45s are in their GitHub repository. Summary spreadsheets we created, including polling station level comparisons for all 4 constituencies, are linked to in the description below. We encourage you to examine the data yourself, run the same comparisons, check our arithmetic, verify our findings. The strength of this analysis lies in its reproducibility. We have not relied on unverified claims. We have used official government data, compared it against contemporaneous documentation, and applied standard statistical analysis. The patterns we document exist in the data. Anyone can verify this. The politicians who emerged from this process now sit in the National Assembly. They vote on laws, they serve on committees, they occupy cabinet positions, but according to the evidence, they do not represent the people of Pakistan.